Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Welcome back to the ADPList and LottieFiles motion design series. And every other week, we bring in famous people from across industry, helping you to understand different softwares that you can get started in the motion design industry. So today we have with us Chris. And Chris is a LottieFiles evangelist and is an award-winning software developer who, in his role, manages UX, architecture, and development to create practical and aesthetic websites. These websites have spanned across multiple industries, including banking, hotels, and engineering, and from different parts of the world, and are being recognized globally as leaders in technological innovation. He has 9 years plus experience when it comes to software development, and he also holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Economics from the University of West Indies. And without further ado, I would request Chris to take up the stage. And yeah, let's get started with today's workshop.
Okay, thank you so much, Luca. Let me just test. You're hearing 1, 2, 1, 2?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. I thank you for that introduction, and always a pleasure. As you said, good morning, good afternoon, good night, because you guys, I mean, is all over the world, right? So you guys, it's 9 p.m. Here it's 9 a.m. So this is really an opportunity, and I really do thank you, and thank you, Yaman, for the introduction. Because what we're going to be doing today is looking a little bit into the whole concept of motion design applied to the web. So while my background, as mentioned, is web, that's not how I started, and I think it'll be a little interesting to kind of share where my journey started and how it ended up at web, which was never, ever part of the plan. Now, I know we have a couple people on the call who have different backgrounds, so as the chat starts to pick up steam and it starts to get warm, I would love for you to just introduce yourself, say where you're from, what your background is, so we can actually get a better idea of who is on the call. Now, that said, we're going to just jump right in because it is an interesting and pretty long presentation. So what we're going to be looking at today, quite simply, is motion design on the web. All right, so we're going to look specifically at building with LottieFiles and Wix, but we're going to touch a lot more than just 2 platforms because we have to understand the principles before we go into the depth of the platform itself. Now, a little backstory on myself. I am very much a developer. I've been coding very heavily since 2014, but I've been breaking things apart from I was much, much younger. And, you know, my parents would be the first persons to tell you that I was the one who would take apart the laptop, never put it back together, because that's what I was very much interested in. And so that's who I am. I have a couple things that I love. I'm very simple in terms of what my passions are. I'm very passionate about teaching. I'm very passionate about developing technology. And I'm very passionate about Jesus. Like, those are the 3. If you talk to me, that's what I'll be talking about. I am currently leading a web development team. I've been doing that for a couple of years, but before that, I used to lead a Google Ads and advertising team. And before that, I used to do Android development. So there is no straight line to this journey. But my passion is to see complex problems broken down to their parts. Anytime we have a discussion, if you see me on the road and Yaman says, "Hey, Chris, can you help me with this? I'm trying to solve this problem." More than likely, my goal will be, all right, I need to fix this for Yaman because this big seeming problem can be broken down to these much, much smaller parts. So making people more productive is the name of the game for me, and technology is the means to achieve it. Now, that said, I mentioned that my origin story was Android development, and it really was. I spent quite a few years learning app development because I was convinced at the time that it makes no sense to build something that's connected to the internet. Why? In my head, I thought the internet was going to go down someday, and you don't want to be stuck with pretty much a dead phone or a dead device because it can't do anything because it needed to be internet connected. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, how do I build applications that can use just the memory on your phone or just the functionality that your phone has built in to do everything it needs to without ever having to touch the internet. Ironically, now I'm a head of web development, but that skill set actually helped me to figure out how to build better applications on the web as well, because it starts to make you think about how to optimize your website as is, how to make sure the JavaScript is running on the page without having to call to another server unnecessarily. And so going into those principles of web and design, I wanted to kind of bring a thought exercise to you. Good design, whether it's web, mobile app, or even in some cases, your servers, is like music. You see, when music is done well, it gives the listener the ability to appreciate the message that the song is trying to bring across, while still enjoying the vibe of the music. One doesn't get in the way of the other. You know, there's a very beautiful quote by E.Y. Harburg. He's the guy that wrote the lyrics to Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I think that was his song, yeah. And he says, words make you think a thought. Music makes you feel a feeling. A song makes you feel a thought. And I think is a very powerful quote, because good design is like good music. In the same way that music is supposed to accompany the words of the song, and you're supposed to be able to get the message while really feeling it and making it stew in your mind, good design is supposed to do the same thing when someone is interacting with your product. It gives you the opportunity to enhance the experience the visitor has while they achieve the core reason that they're on your site visiting. None of us goes on Amazon.com just for the user interface and just to say, wow, the buttons are so yellow, the pictures are so big. But at the end of the day, the way that it's designed and the way the experience works is there to help us get to our core reason for visiting, get it done. And so good design is like music in that it works together with the content that's actually being produced. Now, important point, and this ties in not just with the thought of design, because I know there are many different persons on the call, but also with the mission of ADPList. Because most persons love really good music, but very few desire to make it themselves. Most persons love really good design. I mean, none of you is going to say, my favorite website is the one that gave me the most terrible experience trying to check out, or a terrible experience just trying to sign up for an account. But that doesn't mean that just because you can appreciate really good design, it's something that you yourself want to learn. Few desire to actually learn to design it themselves. And that's something that I've seen in work experience in running many, many interviews, over 30 to 40 interviews, is that there are persons who are just interested in web because it sounds good or it sounds like a field that you can make a lot of money in. But then there are others who just are very passionate about design. And some of the things that you'll see that are different are, one, they have a portfolio. So they're in the interview and they show you the work that they have done. They don't just talk about the work that they think they're going to do in the future. Right? I've had an example where someone came into an interview to me, and I think someone had tipped them off that I love Wix. And so they said, you know, oh, I love designing on Wix. I really love designing on Wix, you know, emphasizing it. Now, to give you context, the person was going into their master's program at university. And so I said, okay, when last did you use Wix? And they said, grade 9. And grade 9, just to translate that, grade 9 is maybe when they were 15, 14. So they're saying that they hadn't used this thing that they love in over 6, 7 years, but they really love Wix, right? You'll find that there are a lot of persons like that who speak a lot about theoretically what they're interested in, but very few desire to learn how to design it themselves. These are the persons who are very, very much into the field itself. I'll give you another example. One of the best designers I've worked with, who was on my team, I asked him one day, like, how did you get so good at design? How is it that you have this eye for design that you just seem to pick things up? And he thought about it. And he said, you know, when he was growing up, one of the things he really liked doing was looking at magazines. So nothing to do with web, but he would look at magazines and how they were designed, how they were laid out, how the pictures would flow. And he would adapt that into his designs. And so he took that into graphic design first and then into web design after. And that is something that I've seen for other good designers. This is something that they're just passionate about, and they draw inspiration from everywhere, right? So that's one thing that shows that you really have a desire to learn it yourself. And another benefit is you have persons around you who are teaching you. And so in his case, his dad was a graphic designer as well. And so he would be designing from he was young, which I think is where ADPList comes in, because this mentorship idea and this mentorship platform, I mean, over 20,000 mentors on the platform. That kind of is pretty amazing, especially when you're trying to learn for yourself and draw ideas from other artists to see how you can apply it for yourself. So the best designers are those who have an inbuilt desire to continue improving on their work, to grow by exposing themselves to the work of other designers and artists. Good. We need to set that baseline, because what we're going to be looking at today is very practical. We're going to show an actual demo of how to add an animation to Wix, to Wix's new platform, which wasn't out the last time we did any of this conversation. And we're also going to look at the different types of animation that you can kind of look at. And I want to set this ground because this may not be as interesting for some of you. I think my slides are here. Yep. This may not be as interesting for some of you because you may really appreciate good design, but you may not necessarily want to learn how to do it yourself. That's completely fine. One of the things I'm hoping is whether or not you're trying to design it yourself or you just want to know how good design looks, that by the end of this, you'll be able to appreciate what is good versus bad design. All right, enough talking. So UX, UI. In web design, one of the most important things is understanding how your users think. That is a core tenet to the entire process. In fact, when you're doing web design, if you go deep into the theory of web design, you probably end up with a degree in psychology, because you have to start asking yourself a couple questions about your users. One, who are they? What do they like to do? What do they not like to do? How old are they? How much do they earn? Where do they live? What we call psychographics, demographics, right? In the user persona. Who are your users? Two, what are they trying to accomplish? Why is it that they're visiting your product, your app, your website? What is the reason? Did they come from an ad? Are they trying to purchase immediately, or do they just want to learn more about you or your organization? What is it that they're trying to accomplish? And then the third question is about both the user and you, because at the end of the day, you don't want persons to just come to the website and leave. You want them to take an action. Every website has a conversion, right? A conversion is that desired action that is in line with your business goal. So I'll say it twice. The conversion is the desired action that's in line with your business goal. It doesn't always mean purchase. If you're a nonprofit, you might want somebody to donate, or you might want somebody to sign up to give their assistance as well. But there is something that you want them to do on your website, or you probably wouldn't have built a website in the first place. And so these are three things that you have to think about when you are doing design. There is a really good formula by BJ Fogg. It's called Fogg's Behavior Formula. And it's also called BMAT. So you may have heard of it described as BMAT. And the way it works is pretty simple. You have behavior, which is a function of motivation, ability, and a trigger. And so people will take a behavior only when they have the motivation to do it, they have the ability to do it, and there's something that has triggered them. Let's take a very simple example. If you have ordered food and you ordered pizza for delivery, and you hear the doorbell ring, and you're sitting at the back of your house, the behavior is that you get up and go and pick up the pizza. Why? One, you're motivated. You are hungry. That's why you ordered the pizza. Two, you have the ability. You can get up and walk to the front of the house. And three, the doorbell was your trigger. Now let's take out any one of them. If you take out the trigger, you don't know that the delivery person is outside. There's nothing for you to actually respond to. So you don't do the behavior of going and picking it up. Let's put back in the trigger. You get the doorbell ringing, but for whatever reason, you're in the shower, even though you knew the pizza was coming. And so at that very moment, you literally cannot go and pick up the pizza. So you take out the ability. 3, motivation. Let's put in the other 2. So you have the ability, you have the trigger, but you don't have the motivation to get up and go for your pizza for whatever reason. Maybe you're full, maybe somebody fed you, or maybe somebody just gave you a plane ticket to go to Indonesia, right? And you have to go to the airport. So your motivation to pick up the pizza is so much lower now. You're like, all right, I'll call the pizza a loss. So any behavior is really a function of these 3 things: motivation, ability, and trigger. And when you're designing, and when you're putting animations on your design, even these are important to keep in mind. All right, how are we going so far? Need to hear some voices just to make sure we're still awake.
All right.
Okay. Just one voice? There's only one person on the call. Remember, I can't see you guys. I don't know how much energy is coming in.
All good.
All good.
Sir.
All right. I like that. Okay, so now we understand that we need to understand our user. What's next? Well, for the sake of time, let's focus more on the actual animations themselves. So say you've decided that you have your website and you want to put some animations in place on your website to cause increased conversion. It's very important for you to notice how to use animations effectively. And that's what I hope to convey to you now. Because there is such a thing as ineffective animation or unnecessary animation for the sake of animation. And we want to avoid that as much as we can. Another important thing that I want to emphasize is we're talking about web animations. And that's important because what we're talking about today with LottieFiles is a set of SVG animations or scalable vector graphics. So animations that you can add to your site that add maybe a small footprint in terms of the size. But we're not talking about Pixar or Disney animations. And that's important because when you're watching a Disney animation, you're watching the animation. But when we're talking about web animations, the person isn't there to see your animation. They're there to go to the website, and your animation isn't additive. It's an additional benefit for them. So when we're talking about web animations, they need to be subtle, and they need to add to the experience and not take it away. Now, I'd give 5 major groups of animations that you can kind of look at. So you have entrance animations. These briefly introduce a web page. So you go on it and the page is loading. Loading animations can fall under entrance. They can also fall under transition. But entrance is really what introduces the person to your site. Then you have transitional animations, and this is screen to screen. So you may have a nice loading animation between 2 screens or between 2 states on a screen. You may have been on websites where they have this thing called skeleton loading, where you've loaded the outer part of the website. Maybe Shopify has this, for example. You've loaded the outside of the website, but the data is still being pulled in. And so you see this kind of like shimmering animation going across the screen. That's called a skeleton loading animation. And it's a transitional animation because you're moving from one state to another. Then we have aesthetic animations. Now, aesthetic animations are there for the looks. Like, they're not really functional, but they're there to make the page look really nice. And so they fall under that category of enhancing the experience of the website, but they don't necessarily give you any extra functionality. We have instructional. Instructional gives you information, so it could be informational or instructional. Think of those nice animations that show you how to use an app when you first open it, and it gives you like a quick run through of somebody using the app in an animated format. Those are instructional or informative animations. And then interactive. Now I put a star here because Interactive animations are there to, improve the website design, but you can actually do things like hover over them or click them, and they will respond to user input. And they're less used, especially in Lottie, but I'm going to show you some interesting ones today that the team at Lottie themselves have actually designed, just to show you the extreme version of what you can do with an interactive animation. So a few examples, we're not going to go through all of them. Here's an example of an entrance animation, right? So follow the bird. So when the page loads, you have a short, very 2D bird coming across. And then the rest of the page loads after. So that would be an entrance animation, right? And in this case, this one has audio with it too, which is pretty cool. So if you want to see more on that one, you can see that on Tubic Studio's website. They have a nice list of animations that you can take a look at. Then we have an example of an aesthetic animation, right? So aesthetic animations like this one next to the home sweet home, they're really there with the purpose of enhancing your design experience, right? So this is a site that we had designed, and we're using a Lottie animation that has been color coded to match the style of the site, just to kind of show that comfort of home, drinking the coffee under the AC, experiencing, the aesthetic nature of the entire site. So making sure it matches the design of the site. An interactive animation, here's an example from Lottie's blog itself. When you click on this animation, it's doing a very simple example, but the star turns red and the circle behind just appears. And this can be cool for those designs where you want something to track the mouse, for example. So you want it to move where the mouse is moving. You can do that through interactive design, and it can be a nice design experience for the person who's on the site. You can also play sound. So when this is clicked, a sound is actually played on the site itself. And so you can start music, you can start other sound effects based on the user's interaction, whether it's a hover or a click. And so interactive animations can also add something to the site. One place that you can see the extreme, and I do call it the extreme because it's the far end, is on Lottie.games. This is a site created by Mattia from Lottie. He created these proofs of concept to show you what can be done with Lottie animations, even though it's a 2D library, to kind of emphasize that this is something that you can interact even more heavily than just the click that I'm showing here. Right, so I definitely recommend that you check out Lottie.games. Just to give you a preview, if you haven't clicked it or gone to it yet, you can play a drum set. So he's created a Lottie drum set where you can click the drum and the drum sound will play. You can click a cymbal and the cymbal will play. He created a Doom, if you remember the original game, a Doom recreation within a Lottie element. Right, so you can actually play Doom in a Lottie element. I know, every time I say it, let me say it again and see if I believe it. You can play Doom in a Lottie element, right? That's pretty crazy. And he also created a kind of a Space Invaders type of game as well, where you can, shoot these rocks, shoot these aliens coming towards you, all within Lottie, to show that Lotties can be an interactive addition to your website. So these are just a couple of examples. And now I want to go into what it looks like when you're using Lottie and Wix, right? So we're really going to go into more of a demo now. So as I stop sharing and pull up the new screen, are there any questions so far?
Yeah, all good so far.
Good so far. Yaman is good so far. Okay, excellent. So let's pull up the editor. And Yaman, I know that you're kind of a Framer supporter, so I hope by the end of this, you at least want to try out Wix for yourself. just to see what's possible.
Probably, we'll see.
Okay, so pulling up the screen here. All right, so let me just start from the beginning. This is an example of how your Wix dashboard will look. Right, so when you go to wix.com and you sign up for a free account, you're able to create your site without paying any money or putting in a credit card. But your site will be a free site hosted at this domain that's tied to your account name and Wix's name. And you'll be able to create as many free sites as you need until you're happy. And the only time you start to pay is when you start paying for your subscription. So like you want to connect to domain or you want to enhance the size of your database, that's when you start to pay. So I'm going to select this site. I'm going to edit it. And what will happen is it will open a new tab, which I just happen to have open already. That will give me the ability to start editing the design. Now, if you are familiar with Wix or you've used it in the past, this is Wix's new platform, Wix Studio. And the purpose of it is to give you a more responsive, much more functional experience than what they had before. And they've added quite a few functionality into the editor. Now we've created this fictitious insurance company, Bisurance. And what we're going to do is find an animation on LottieFiles that we think can actually complement this. So let's hop over to LottieFiles.com. And given that it's an insurance website, let's try and find something symbolic to insurance that in this would be aesthetic. So we have these pop up, I think a bit too much in the way for me. So let's do insurance umbrella. And we're going to, just for the sake of the demo, do a free one. And I think I like this one from Jar Design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to my workspace. So to do that, you click download and you save to your workspace. And I'm going to put it in this folder, Chris Demo. And you'll see that I have my animation in my workspace in LottieFiles. Now, to get it over to Wix, there are a couple different ways that I'm going to show you. The easiest is what's called the asset link. And to do that, you go to handoff and embed, and you enable the asset link. And what that does is it publishes your animation to be used on other platforms. And so we would be able to copy this asset link. But we have a little problem. Unless I'm colorblind, none of these colors match the animation that I'm actually looking at over here on Lottie. So what we need to do first is actually change the color scheme. So we click on color palette. And for the sake of time, I'm going to look for one that looks the most similar. So I'm seeing some dark green, lighter green. All right. So I think this one is pretty close. So I'm going to run with that one. And now I'm ready to share it. That's actually really green, though. Let's see if anything else. Okay, I think I'll run with this one. So now that I have that, I need to save the animation so that it can update the asset link. Save changes. And then now we can go back over to our asset link, let the version update. So make sure it's on the current version, which is version 1. Copy the asset link, and then we head back over to Wix. Great. So half of our work is done. Now the easier half comes. So I want this to show up on the page. Now, of course, like a good demo person, I did a demo with this before. So I'm going to delete that. And I want it to come in this section where it says all about B-insurance. To do that, I'm going to add a Lottie animation by clicking on the plus in the top left corner where it says add elements. I'm going to jump to embed in social, and I'm going to scroll down to where it says Lottie animation. Very simple. I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to attach it to this element stack. So stack is like vertically or horizontally grouped elements in Wix. I'm going to move it down. And then all I need to do at this point is change the animation and paste the new asset link. And there it is. And so just for us to make sure it's working, we're just going to preview the site to see how it would look on the actual site. Okay. And now we get to our animation now. Oh, great. And so because our animation is actually within the stack, it's also stuck in place, it's fixed in place. So it has that nice effect of the text scrolling past while you're still being protected by the umbrella. Great. Ooh. Successful demo number 1. Okay, great. So we've added an animation to Wix, and it only took us 6.45 minutes. But, you know, it was very quick. And that's what I want you to see. This is something that doesn't have to take long. Now, any designer would then, at this point, fine-tune. They'd make sure that the other sizes look good. So tablet and then mobile have to look good as well, especially since most of your visitors will be on mobile. But you've just added a Lottie animation to your Wix site in a very short amount of time. So, I mean, let me just ask quickly in the chat. Does this seem like something you could do? All right, KF is saying yeah. Henriette says yeah. Akash, oh yeah. Easy peasy. I like that. I like that, Kingsley, for real. Very easy. Now, one of the other beautiful things about Wix is that since recently, they've also gone more into the development side. So if you're a designer and a developer, then you also have the ability to open up new functionality that maybe a designer wouldn't be able to access as readily. So what do I mean by that? Wix also has a code panel, and that code panel allows you to write JavaScript code and also run Node.js code in the backend side of your site, so the server side. And that allows you to do things like interact with the databases, interact with the NPM modules from Node Package Manager, and also you can connect to GitHub directly from your Wix site. In our case, what we want to do is look at the other way that you can connect an animation to your Wix site. So let's hop back over to our animation. And I think we're going to go with the green version. So let's go back to green and save. So we're updating the animation. And instead of using the asset link, which would work, what we want to do is actually download a version of this in its Lottie format. So to do that, we're going to go up to download and export. And we're going to download the Lottie JSON or the optimized Lottie JSON. So I'm going to download this. I'm going to open it in a new window. So this part you might not see, but it can open in a text editor, or if you have a code editor open in IDE, you'll be able to go in there as well. And you get to really see the inner workings of how Lottie works. So Lottie animations are really JSON objects, JavaScript object notation objects that have all of the details of how the frames move in the animation and which frames actually show up at what time. And it looks like one big JSON string anytime you have it set up. And so we can actually update the animation by using the elements on the screen. And so we do that by doing Lottie embed. Right? Because that's the ID of the element. So Lottie embed 1 dot source. So source is the attribute that allows you to change the element. And then we do equals, and we just paste that long JavaScript object notation string right in place. That's it. And so when we go into preview now, what we would have just done, let me scroll right back across so you can see, is we've set the Lottie element to this new value. So how this looks is when we go down now in preview, once the page is loaded, it will update the animation to our new green and blue animation. And this is useful for a couple different scenarios. If you're the one that's creating the Lottie animation yourself, and you've exported it from the body moving plugin, and you just have the JSON object, but you don't necessarily want to upload it to LottieFiles.com, you can put it directly in your code just like this. In a sense, you're self-hosting your animation. But it also allows some even more interesting things. You can start changing attributes on the fly. So if you wanted it to change the green to another color on click, then you can edit that animation export, that JSON string, and it will be able to do that as well. So you get more ability when you're doing it this method. All right. So that's pretty much what we wanted to discuss in terms of adding it to your site. This is something you can do very easily. This site looks good. I didn't design it. It's actually a template on Wix. And there are many more templates you can choose from that match your industry. And you can add it to any site that you have. Another important thing is that this is Wix's new editor called Wix Studio. There are 2 older editors that it uses as well, one called Editor X and one called Classic Editor. Classic Editor is the one that's going to continue on. Editor X is being merged into this one that we're on. But the important thing is that you can use Lottie animations in the same way on all of them. Right? So this is something that goes across any of Wix's editing platforms. And so when you're ready to go live and you want to share this link with somebody online, you just hit publish. You will get a URL that you can share. And this now is publicly accessible to anyone on the internet. All right, so, and it has the same changes that we would have just done. All right, so that's it for the demo part. And then wrapping up, I want to make sure that we are good on time, first of all, but that we also look at a couple design tips. Okay, good.
I think there's some questions in the chat. Yeah, fair question.
Yeah, Chris. So we have first one from Kevin, and it's what's the difference between Wix Studio and Classic Wix?
Good question. So Wix Studio it's really the features, but also the target audience. Wix Studio is more geared towards persons who have maybe a CSS design background and who are coders. And it also gives you responsiveness so you can design per breakpoint. So if you wanted to have a widescreen view that's different from mobile, that's different from tablet, for iPad, that's different from another size, you actually get the ability to control the design on each of those screen sizes on Wix Studio. Classic doesn't give you all of that flexibility. It really gives you just mobile and desktop. And then Classic is also not responsive. Wix Studio also gives you more coding functionality because you can code in another tab. So you really have kind of a virtual Visual Studio Code cloud instance where you can code in another tab or on another screen while you're doing the design. And you can also collaborate with other persons at the same time on the same site. That right now isn't available on Classic Editor at all. Classic Editor is more quick, you can jump in and do something a little less flexible, but it will still look good. In fact, here's an example of a classic editor site. So I don't want you to think classic doesn't look good. Right? You can still get a good looking site with classic editor. It's just that it's not geared as much towards collaboration and heavy coding. The coding experience is a lot simpler. And, Wix Studio also is eventually going to cost more money than classic, which is another important part of the equation. But both of them, actually all of them are free to start with. So you don't pay to design your site or to do all the coding that I just showed you. All of that is free for both Classic and Wix Studio. You only pay when you're ready to upgrade.
Okay, so the last part actually answers Kingsley's question. So yeah, we are good with the questions for now.
Cool. All right, if you have any more, please shoot them in the chat. All right, so outside of that, I just wanted to share a couple of design tips before we close out. One of them, it should have come through before, but you should always avoid excess animations. Use animations sparingly. Good design supports the core purpose of the website rather than hindering it. So you don't want too many animations that cause the site to slow down or get in the way of, simple button clicks and the real goal that persons have on your site. Remember, this is not a Disney movie. They're not here to see your animation. They're here to do a business activity, and your animation is supposed to guide them or assist it. Ask the question, do you need animation? Including SVG animations on your website should not be the default answer. It should be something that you choose to do. So make sure that you ask the question, do I need an animation? Match the color scheme. So you might see a really nice animation on LottieFiles.com and you just want to drop it on your site. But I would urge you, change the color palette to match the site that you're on so that it doesn't stick out as, oh, I found a nice animation and I dropped it. It should look tailored for the site that it's on. And you can do that very easily without changing any frames of the animation, like the keyframe, by just changing the color scheme. And then last, test your site speed afterwards. So after you install your animations and they're looking good, and you're like, okay, Chris said make sure that I don't clutter it, they don't look cluttered. Chris said I should ask if I need the animation. I know I need the animation. It matches the color scheme. Well, make sure to test the site speed as well, because you want to make sure that it's not slowing down your site significantly. Now, the beauty of Lottie animations is that because they're SVG based, and SVGs are just, paths, so it's from A to B to C to D and then back to A, rather than, rendered pixels, they will be lighter than GIFs, they will be lighter than PNGs in most cases. So it shouldn't slow down your site heavily. But you should always still test your site speed just to make sure that it's not pulling too much away from your actual site. And even Lottie animations can get big. I had a guy on our team that he was testing the extent of Lottie animations, and he copied the entire script of the Bee movie and put it in one single Lottie animation going across the screen, just to see how much it could handle. And it handled it. But that, of course, would be heavier in terms of how much space it takes up on your site. So just check your site speed afterwards. And if you're building an app, check your app speed afterwards, because it applies as well. And yeah, those are my closing tips. So I think, yeah, that's it. Thank you. If you found this interesting, you can check out more content from me on LinkedIn and X and YouTube, actually. I have a couple videos explaining how to add Lotties to Wix, like how we just discussed it. And please, if you have any questions, I'd love to field them right now.
We have the next one from Kevin. It's the mobile editing version of Classic Wix is quite bad. Is it better in Wix Studio?
Yes, it is. It's a lot better objectively, and I will show you, because if I said that, I would only half believe me. So I'm going to just actually show you what it's like. So really quickly, let's say you jumped over to your mobile editor and you didn't like the size of how the animation came. You can, of course, reduce it and move it around and maybe even take it out of the box so that it doesn't show up the way that it does on desktop. But one of the nice things about Studio is that they've released this thing called responsive AI, where you just tell it to do all of the mobile design on all of the screen sizes. And in about 30 seconds, it will find an appropriate design for mobile and then just do it for you. All right, so it is easier. How it does it, the Wix team said that it's pulled from a lot of designs that it has online to see what is an appropriate layout for different items. And it kind of tries the different ones, as you can see on the screen. And then by the end of it, it's supposed to give you an AI-generated better version of that layout. And then if you don't like it, of course, you have the option of just discarding the changes. So we could go down to mobile, see what it did. Yeah, I don't like that. See what it did. And you can move it around if you want. So you could go into edit and move it around, or just discard the changes and make it undo. And then you could do it yourself from here. But I do think it's easier in the sense of you can get a better cohesive design on all screen sizes versus the classic editor, where it's like you have two different websites in total.
I have another one, and this is, have you seen any differences with Lottie animations between desktop and mobile sites?
No, that's a good question. And no, I haven't. They're pretty consistent across both platforms, tablets as well. I think the times that I've seen issues is Apple. Apple devices usually give Lottie some heartache. I'm not sure if it's still the same now, but they would give some difficulty in actually pulling the SVG animation and rendering it properly. But regardless of the device size, it's been consistent.
Looks like that was the last one for today. Thanks a lot, Christopher, for joining us today. And I would say it was such a smooth session. And maybe Yamin can testify if his love for Wix has increased now or not.
Tell me, Yamin, tell me.
I mean, I never say no to anything which helps me design. So it was very interesting. I definitely like gives me kind of pushes me to check out Wix again. So yeah,
That's good.
okay.
Yeah, mission
That's good.
successful.
Yeah, that's good. And more than that, I do hope that if you are a designer on the call, you left with some design takeaways. Some of this may not have been new to you, but at least it should rekindle some of your thoughts about how you approach design when you're designing for users and not for yourself.
Yeah, I would definitely agree to that. And yeah, thanks again, Christopher, for joining us today. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us here. And I'm sharing the socials for Chris as well as the link to the next session. So the next session is going to be on Framer, how you can use LottieFiles and Framer together. And this is happening next week. And yeah, see you all then. Thanks a lot and have a great rest of the week.